A humanoid is a creature that resembles a human without being one. There are many stories of humanoid creatures with ill intent. In today's video, I will be sharing 2 stories involving some of these creatures. A huge thank you to the writers, whose links can be found in the description. Remember, you can send in your own story to rylhstories@gmail.com. If you enjoy the video, feel free to support it with a like and a comment letting me know your thoughts. Subscribing if you're new is also very much appreciated. Enjoy the video, and as always, I hope you all have a great night. Growing up, my parents didn't let me watch cartoons because they would ruin my brain and make me dumb, as they would say. Instead, I found myself watching a lot of shows about monsters or aliens, or other things paranormal. I remember many nights where I was too scared to go to bed, because I'd just watched one of those scary programs on those channels. I live in an area that is pretty heavily wooded. I do have a decent amount of neighbors. However, everything behind my house is dark woods at night. The creepy darkness of the foreboding woods scratches to get into my backyard. In fact, my entire neighborhood, which is rather small, is actually surrounded by woods, making the nighttime a time that encapsulates all of the houses by that eerie darkness. When I take out the garbage at night, or come home from work late around 2 a.m., I sprint to the door and turn around, looking out at what may be lurking and waiting for me as I unlock the front door of my house and slide in quickly. Even though now that I've passed through school, and am in my final years of college, I still imagine those hideous creatures I'd seen on TV, chasing me down and killing me, if I didn't run fast enough. I must say that I am probably never going to get out of this jumpy stage in my life. Of course I wouldn't, not after that night. That experience with that thing, I don't know what to call it. About 3 years ago, my relatives from Europe came to visit some of my family members I had in Vermont. At the time, my parents had chosen to drive up to Vermont, to all have a gathering there, since it had been almost 15 years since the last visit, leaving me to drive up on my own the next day after my classes ended, since it was spring break. After coming home to pack up for the visit, I hopped in my car and put in the address of my relatives in Vermont. First it told me 6 hours to arrive, but when I hit the button my phone's GPS notified me there was heavy traffic due to construction work. That 6 hours grew to 8.5. Great. This was going to be a fun drive, much longer than I remember it as a 7-year-old. I left at a decent hour, and by that I mean I left at 8 at night to hopefully avoid some of the construction work, which was causing the heavy traffic. About an hour in, I stopped for some snacks and gas. By this point, I was feeling pretty good about my drive, thinking an hour went so fast. What's another 7 going to be? Not much for me. Finally, I was on Interstate Route I-91, after almost 3 hours of driving. And of course, this was the part where it would slow down, as this was the highway that was being worked on. From what I can remember, as I was nearing Greenfield, Massachusetts, my GPS told me of an alternative route that was faster. I just needed to make a left, and follow some smaller state routes to the west a few dozen miles or so. This would have shaven off a couple of hours and slow driving, which is one of my pet peeves. I took the turn and was delighted to see an open yet curvy road ahead of me. It was nearing 1 in the morning. I began thinking of ways to go inside my relative's house at such a late hour, without disturbing them. I'll cut away the next hour and a half or so, that was mostly uneventful in this less traveled road, and cut to the part that will haunt me for years, possibly for the rest of my life. When I got close to a town called Dover in Vermont, for some reason it sounded familiar to me. I don't remember why though. I checked my GPS and saw that I only had 90 miles to go. This sudden good news distracted me from the fact that I had made a wrong turn somehow, and ended up being on a bumpier road. This is where I knew some serious crap might happen to me. My eyes widened as I noticed the GPS signal was lost on my phone. Perfect. I was in the middle of nowhere with no GPS signal. I pulled over and tried to think of the last few turns I made to get back to the original alternate route. Now that it was after 2 a.m. and about 20 degrees out, I quickly got a cold feeling in my chest. almost like the area around me was filled with demons and monsters. I tried to shrug it off, but couldn't. I suddenly felt a burning feeling in my bladder. I had to urinate so badly that I needed to unload it somewhere. I sat for a few minutes in my car, until I forced myself to get out and pee somewhere next to it. I quickly made my situation worse, as I mistakenly turned off my car in this cold weather in a panic about running out of gas with no phone signal. I hopped out of my car slowly, and walked around it to pee. However, as soon as I got out, I noticed the different foliage in this area, and how it looked too different. As I went to pee, I kept my back against the side of the car, out of fear of something grabbing me from behind. Something that has always sat with me as one of my biggest fears. As my eyes adjusted to the darkness, I quickly picked up on a foul smell in the air, almost like death itself was living in these woods. As I finished up and was going back into my car, I caught a glimpse of something I wish I had not noticed before. Several of the trees had long scratches in them, and I don't mean like small scratches from two teenagers carving their names into them. These were deep, heavy, and unclean gashes in these trees. I realized then that it was time to get the hell out of here. I felt the darkness close in my car as I got inside. What happened next nearly sent a chill down my spine. I turned the keys in the ignition 4 times until my old 1997 Taurus finally whimpered to life. It was a mistake to turn it off. I rejoiced in the fact that my car magically started, despite being 20 years old in sub-freezing weather. However, that quick feeling of bliss disappeared as soon as it came, as I remembered I was still in the middle of nowhere, with no GPS signal. I quickly made a U-turn, catching another glimpse of the gashes in the trees, which I could now see affected more trees deeper in the woods. I should probably mention this as well. As I made the turn, my headlights caught something moving in the distance along the trees. I paused to look at what it was. A person? How and why? I was wondering what to do in this situation. Do I help him, or is he here to rob me and steal my car? I allowed him to come about 30 feet of my car, and before I had the chance to question him, he shouted at me, "Run! There's something evil in these woods. I am a lost cause, just go." I then caught a glimpse of his body. My heart jumped into my throat as I saw his left arm had been ripped off, and was bleeding and dripping. At that moment, I knew it was time to get out of here. I questioned myself if this was some kind of sick prank, but threw out that idea when the man got closer, because I could see he really was bleeding and suffering like a soldier. Reality hit me right in the face as he inched closer to my car, and I floored my old Ford out of there, the suffering man's words echoing in my head. I felt bad for leaving him there, but the adrenaline made me leave him for dead. What could I do for him anyways? I was pushing 90 miles an hour in my car, but time felt like it was moving slowly, as I realized the man did not say someone evil was in the woods, but rather he said something. My imagination ran wild as all the dark and evil creatures from my memories flashed in my head. Was this one of the things I'd seen on TV? Just then I remembered why Dover sounded so familiar to me. The story of the Dover demon from the 1970s or 1980s, when a college student saw some kind of humanoid figure walking by the side of the road on all fours. I got nervous now. I was in this creature's territory, and it was already not happy, seeing how that man had turned out. Was this really happening to me? Was I going to finally meet one of the monsters from my childhood? As I had quickly raced back the way I came, I met the road I had previously turned off of. Stupidly, I stopped at the intersection, before I made the right to check if any cars would be coming by. I looked both ways, first left, then right. That was when I saw it. My entire body felt limp, and my heart stopped. I shouted as that thing was menacingly staring at me through the window. Time seemed to stop as it stared at me. It was hunched over, skin pale and tightly pulled around its body, yet hanging off the front of its torso and legs. It had a distended stomach, above which I could see its rib cage and deep indentation in its flesh where a normal person's solar plexus would be. But the worst part was its face. I felt like I was looking at something straight from hell. Its head had not a single hair on it. It had protruding temple bones and deep eye sockets, filled with what I wouldn't even call eyes. Those eyes. Those dark and black soulless eyes that seemed to tear a hole in the back of my mind. It had 2 small holes in place of a nose, and perhaps the most menacing feature, its mouth, with its lips hanging low with drool, and its jagged sharp teeth looking sharper than kitchen knives. I am able to describe all of this that I saw in that instant, because that disgusting face is forever burned into my mind. I spared no time and hammered my foot on the gas pedal to the floor. My car burned rubber and then began to accelerate down the road. I must have ran over its foot with the rapidly spinning wheel of my car, as it then let out the most disgusting and blood-curdling screech I'd ever heard. It sounded a mixture of a psych ward patient and a horse being shot in the chest with an arrow. Now the chase was on. The monster began to run after my car. Why did it want me? Was its other victim not good enough? My car gradually approached its top speed, but the thing was just barely losing its ground on me. If I had not been in that situation, I would have been impressed by the creature's ability to run that fast. The road was curvy, so I had to slow down to avoid crashing. I knew that would be a game over if I had crashed. That monster could eat me and leave no trace of my body within seconds, if I survived. The reduced speed allowed the monster to keep pace with me. I came to a fork in the road. I took the right turning road and caught some air over a bridge. The road straightened out here, and I picked up speed even more, edging out to 110 miles an hour. I checked my mirrors to see something even more disturbing. I looked back at the bridge in the distance to see 4 or 5 more sets of dark black soulless eyes had appeared out from under the bridge, all staring at me like the first one. Then all 6 monsters in total began to sprint to catch up to me. I began to contemplate stabbing myself with a knife in my glove box. I'd never get to say goodbye to my parents or relatives. Was this the end for me? The emaciated bodies in my mirror were gaining. I could even hear them all shouting and gurgling in unison, with their mouths wide open, lips flapping in the wind. I had to do it. I had to kill myself in the car to avoid being taken by those demons. This was the end. As I leaned over to reach the knife in my glove box, I caught out of the corner of my eye the sign to get back onto Interstate Route 91. This was my ex machinima. I had a chance of losing those evil creatures on the highway. I slammed my glove box shut and yanked the steering wheel to the quickly approaching on-ramp. I made an illegal left turn onto the highway, going the wrong way, and drove 500 feet back and turned around. Those sick and twisted monsters entered the same way I did, but lost me and chased another car instead, which I'm guessing they assumed was my car. The man in the other car must have noticed the things chasing him, as I heard his loud exhaust rattle in the night air. He floored his vehicle to escape those demons. He seemed to be in a much faster car than I, as his brake lights quickly shrunk into small red dots, and eventually disappeared. The pursuing monsters, I observed from a great distance, seemed to be startled by the sound of the car's exhaust. To my luck, they turned around and swiftly dipped into the woods on the side of the highway, and were finally out of sight. I was able to get a signal back on my phone. 30 more miles to go and I'd be at my relative's house. I cautiously drove the rest of the way, checking my mirrors for anything dangerous. Luckily, when I arrived at my relative's house, the garage door had been left open. I briskly pulled my car in and shut the door behind it. I let out a shaky sigh of relief and took in everything that had happened to me as I got out of the car and stood in the dimly lit garage. I was shaking, my heart racing probably around 180 beats per minute. I felt sick. I eventually calmed down, or calmed down a little bit at least, and looked at the clock on the wall of the garage. 3:52 a.m. I figured it was bedtime. I stumbled through my relative's house to find the empty guest room in the back of the house on the second floor. To my dismay, they had remodeled it and expanded the room to include a lot of windows. I was on display for anyone, or anything, lurking in the vast Vermont woods. It took me an hour to finally fall asleep, but I eventually did. I wish my nightmarish tale could end there, but it doesn't. For the rest of the visit, I enjoyed several activities with my family, almost investing myself too much in the things we did to try and forget about that hellish experience. On the morning of the last day of the visit, I woke up super early, around 7 a.m. I had been in a good mood from drinking all night with my uncles, and was feeling generous. I'd gotten the sudden urge to buy my relatives from Europe a cheesy parting gift, as they would be leaving for their homes for another 10 to 15 years. I mustered up the strength to get up and dress super warm to drive to a local Walmart that was open early, and got there 5 minutes after it opened. I drove my car there, parked in a spot by the side wall of the store, and quickly went in and returned to my car bearing some cheesy cards and small gifts for my family members. As I rounded the corner to get back to my car, my heart once again fell into my stomach, and then shot up into my throat as I stopped dead in my tracks, and felt a sickness again. I found myself staring at the same man in the woods, who was suffering from a lost arm that was supposedly bitten off by those evil humanoid creatures. He blurted out to me, "We're coming for you." All sorts of alarms went off in my head. How did he find me here? Or better yet, how and why is he still alive? What was he? Why did he want to come for me again? Why did he say that? "We're coming for you." I panicked and ran back into the store, quickly running to a more populated part of it, and waited for nearly 45 minutes before coming out again. This time the coast was clear, and I safely made it to my relative's house just in time for brunch. That evening we said our goodbyes, and I hopped in my car and followed my parents back to our house in New Jersey, making sure they stayed on Route 91, away from the road I'd taken. That night I did some research about my encounter, and learned that what I saw the other night was a skinwalker. I also found out that they can shapeshift into human forms if they want to play tricks on people and lure them to their doom. It then hit me. The man was never in any trouble. He didn't exist. That wasn't a man at all. It was one of them, those evil skinwalkers. I had spoken to one. It tricked me. I felt nauseous at the notion of what I had experienced. I felt totally defeated and vulnerable. Time passed on without any incidents. The next year I got accepted into medical school in Boston. I was delighted to spend the next few years of my life in an urban area, away from any threats lurking in the night. However, I am still frantic at night, and I run to my car whenever I am alone. I also am weary of unfamiliar people and fear that it may be one of those skinwalkers trying to catch me again. All I have to say is please be careful when driving around rural Massachusetts and Vermont areas. It may save your life. Like I've said in my previous stories, I appear to be a magnet for the strange and otherworldly. It seems drawn to me for some reason. I've never understood why. But of all the things I've experienced living in this small town in Pennsylvania, I believe this. This thing gave me the key, and I mean the literal key, to answering my questions as to why. Let us begin. It was the day after my birthday, Tuesday, April 2nd. Yes, I know, I'm the April Fool. Maybe I am. I had just gotten off work. It was 10 p.m. and I stepped outside and texted my ride. Much to my surprise, they said they weren't coming. Of course, I said out loud. My manager offered to stay with me while I found another ride home, or to take me herself. Then someone came into the parking lot, a familiar black Dodge Ram, a truck I haven't seen in over 4 years. My good friend Barr, who went to the Marine Corps after high school, was driving. In the back seat, my friends John and his sister Jessie, who moved to Virginia after high school, and between them was Will, who stopped speaking to me when the group sort of disbanded. Now, just to be clear, I've changed everyone's names to protect their identities. Any stories I have involving them, I'll be using these names to keep it easy to tell who's who. I hopped in the truck and the group of us headed off. After arriving at my home, they asked me if I'd like to go to the old spot. Let me explain. The old spot was a little camping area we used to go to back in the day. I happily said yes. Hell yes, in fact. I was reluctant to tell my girlfriend. She had never met my friends, but I'd told her countless stories of old days. I wanted to enjoy my night catching up. We headed off deep into the woods, and after making a fire and setting up, having drinks, and just overall having a good time recounting our teenage years and swapping stories of how our lives have been, we all began to tire. Barr was showing off his new .45 Magnum revolver. I can recall countless times he brandished his old .44 his dad gave him, and all the times we fired it together, even one time back in 2017, when the whole scary clowns crap was going on, him basically making 3 of them crap themselves by showing it. A short story, but a story for another day. More of a comedy, that one though, I admit. I headed off to go to the bathroom. I went off into the tree line just out of sight, but not too far into the dark, the fire and my friends still in view. As I unzipped my jeans, I heard Jessie do a cat-calling whistle to me. Just for context, Jessie is like a sister to me, but we did have a thing as teenagers. She's a very open person and not afraid to act like a guy when it comes to most conversations. I missed this. My friends, my best friends. The people I trust more than anything or anyone. My friends who have shared some of my experiences. And I'm afraid to tell even them this. As I was pissing, I heard a stick crack in the distance. Now, animals in this area are common. My hometown is, as I said in the past, like 3 towns basically put together with one long highway connecting them, and some surrounding parts of them. We're surrounded by mountains on all sides, the main one being called Roxon. I've slightly changed its actual name to keep the exact location less obvious. Please understand, I do this for my own safety as well as yours. This place, as you'll come to learn, is strange. I assumed it was a deer. Deer are the most common, maybe something smaller. Then I thought, what if it's a mountain lion? Mountain lions are common in Pennsylvania, despite locals refusing to accept that they do live in this area. I could hear the others still laughing and talking. I quickly finished my business, and reached for my own gun. I only just recently got this one. It's a Smith & Wesson 1911. It fires .45 ammo. It's a reliable weapon. I mean, they haven't changed its design since it was made, hence its name 1911. Some small details. Now I'm going to give you the gun's name. Some gun enthusiasts like myself name our weapons. Sort of like how car guys name their cars. Like Barr named his aforementioned new 44 Mary, after his mom. So when I refer to the name, the Ulysses, understand I'm referring to my 1911. I grabbed my pistol and slowly pulled it from its holster. I began to slowly back away from where I was standing, trying not to make too much noise. I could hear the others fell silent. I could feel them watching me, and I heard Barr coming towards me. As he got close, he whispered, "What is it?" He had his .44 in hand. I'm not sure. I heard a twig crack. Could be a bear or a mountain lion. I said to him. The 2 of us backed away slowly to the campfire. After reaching it and our friends, we all agreed it was late and time to go home. We began quietly putting things away and packing into the truck, trying to keep quiet just in case. As the others all climbed in the truck, I realized I'd left my keys sitting on the nearby stump. I quietly crept over to retrieve them. That's when I saw it. Or them, I guess. Bright glowing red dots. My gut clenched. One thing I've learned in my life is some advice I was given by my great-grandfather. Always listen to your gut. My gut told me to stay put, and so I did. Within a few seconds it began to be visible. It was at least 7 feet tall, wearing black tattered rags, 2 massive horns on both sides of its head. Its face. I can't begin to describe it. Like a cow skull but with long fangs on the front. It looked at me and I at it. Then it put up its left arm. Its hand was large, bigger than my head, but not quite the size of a torso. Elongated black gnarled claws on the end. The way its hand was held out, it was like it was offering me something, or asking me to take its hand. On the end of the claw at the top, on what would be the human hand, the index finger was a rusty key dangling on a ring that looked new. I could hear a distant growl, deep, too deep for an animal, but also not threatening. I grabbed my keys and I felt it, a feeling of being compelled to go take the key from the thing. I took 1 step toward it when John's voice echoes out. "T, come on, let's go. We heard something." Followed by the sound of Barr. "Get in the truck, man." I shook my head and looked back. It was gone, but deep in the darkness of the woods. I could see its eyes still. I got in the truck and they took me home. I sat up all night thinking about it, trying to figure out what it could be. I assumed Lashawn maybe. No, I've studied mythology of all kinds. Similar, but sure as hell not it. The skull was right, but not the rags. key hand, or even the horns. A demon of some kind? Perhaps. I still haven't figured it out. A few days passed, and each one we hung out with my friends. My girl had finally met them, and every time it was still bugging me. Finally, Jesse cornered me. We were out eating lunch one afternoon, and after we ate, Bar went out to have a smoke. He still smokes those expensive cigars that he's always loved. My girlfriend went to the bathroom, and so did John. Will was getting another burger, when Jesse asked me why I stood there after getting my keys. I sighed and told her I felt something compelling me to go into the woods. Her expression turned from curious to worried instantly. We sat for a moment in silence when she finally spoke up. T, how long have we known each other? She asked me. I told her my best guess. She replied with a long statement that I'll never forget. Yeah, and in all that time I know you better than anyone. I know what you do. I know what you think and feel. I know what you believe and what you doubt. But what I know most of all is that when we're with you, especially at night and in the woods or creepy places, weird and bad things happen. She proceeded to recall accounts of events and things that I intend to tell all about another time. From the strange car, to the breather, to even the time I once seemed to scare off a demon by my command alone. When she was done speaking, she said one last thing. If your gut tells you to go find out, go find out. But don't go too far and end up not coming back. Not after last time. Last time. I'd forgotten last time. The chapel and the guy, ghost, demon, thing, whatever it was in the rafters. Just thinking about it sends a shiver up my spine, even while typing this now. I'll tell that story another time too. I took her advice. A few nights ago on the 8th, after fighting myself on it, I decided to go find what I seek. I drove up the mountain in my car, and stopped just off the path that led to our camping spots. I got out and left my car on the highway, dressed in a black long-sleeve shirt with some Kevlar under it, over a white undershirt, some dark blue jeans, and my steel-toe combat boots. In my left boot, a large hunting knife. On my left thigh, the Ulysses. On my belt behind my back, a revolver affectionately named The Last Word, loaded with hollow points, and in my hands, a 12-gauge pump shotgun that I never gave a name, loaded with expensive slugs I bought that day. I started walking off into the woods in the dark, and just a flashlight strapped to my shotgun, with duct tape to light the way. The whole walk into the woods I was terrified. What was it? What did it want? What would happen? Would I ever come back? What if my guns were useless? What if it killed me? What if it showed me what I seek, and I decided not to come home? What would it show me? What was the key for? All these questions rang in my mind when they were suddenly cut short. I heard a voice, deep and inhuman, like that growl, notably audible inside the words. A short half to full second pause between each word. "You've come back," echoed from deep in the dark woods. I turned to face the sound, and pumped my shotgun. "Bullets?" echoed this time. No pause between each. "Ineffective," it said. I kept my shotgun up. The sound appeared to change where it was coming from each time. "Show yourself, demon," I commanded. Silence. An owl hooted from the dark. A bat flew overhead. A deer came out onto the path, saw me, then took off. The voice again. "Come, place, before." The pause again between words. I headed toward the place I had last seen it, and sure enough, right over where our fire had been, in the pitch black, there it was, just as visible as before. I put my shotgun up, but as the light went over the legs where I saw no feet, only the tattered black rags, it faded. It was pitch black now. Only the moon slightly reaching through the trees. Only the deep red glow of its eyes before me. "Hurt you? Intend not," I heard. I stood in place for a moment, and put my shotgun barrel down. As soon as it was off what would be the body or head of the creature, the light came back on. "What do you want?" I said. The deep voice spoke. "Key, take, yes." Its arms reached up, and on the same finger as before was the rusty key on a brand new ring. As close as I was this time, I noticed something. The ring was gold. Fake gold, real gold, I couldn't tell. But it was obviously the color of gold. I hesitated to reach out. The creature stepped closer. I felt no impact, heard nothing, almost as if it was floating. But there was a snap of a stick that faded under the tattered blackness. The voice again spoke. "Take key." I looked up at the creature's face. "Why?" I asked. It tilted its head to the side, then spoke again. "Yours," it said. "What is the key to?" I asked it. It blinked and shook its head slowly. "Not key, take." I looked confused. The M sound was the start of a word, not a or a moan. Again the voice. "Mass." It struggled to say a word. "Master?" I guessed. It shook its head. "Key, take." Its voice began to get deeper and more aggressive. As it said the last word, "Please." It hesitated, held the please as if it was struggling. It sounded like it was in extreme pain. "Tell me why," I demanded. Then it began to fade. Take, time, running out. It had a sense of urgency in its voice. It made it sound almost human. "What is the key to?" I shouted. I wanted to know. I needed to know. Its body began to fade. I quickly reached out and grabbed it. It slipped off the gold-colored ring, as if passing through it. It was old, rusty and grimy, covered in a thick sludge of some kind. It appeared to have trouble. "Thank you. Mass." And it was gone. In the silence of the night I stood, unsure of what to do. I started walking back to my car. I was a little over halfway there. Close enough to hear cars on the highway, as seldom as they were. Then I heard it. A growl not as deep, but similar. As I turned back, I saw those eyes in the dark. And I heard a voice different from the last one. More feminine, but still deep and disturbing. "So he gave it to you. A strange choice." It paused for a moment and I asked, "What's the key for?" I saw a smile form under the eyes. A human smile, but the teeth. They looked normal, but crooked and gnarled. The deep voice from before bellowed, "Run! Mass, run! Key stealer." My legs moved before I could even think. My gut instinct told me to run and not stop. I sprinted as fast as I could toward my car, feeling a presence only a few steps behind me, as a woman's laugh echoed in the dark. I didn't dare look back. I reached my car and got in. I sped off into the night. I looked in my rearview mirror as I drove. In it I could see a shorter, about my size black tattered rag, seemingly floating on the wind, and the face of a woman with those teeth and eyes in the road. Her head tilted back, and her mouth opened. At her sides were her arms, pale gray and skinny, but with long horrid black claws on the fingertips. A liquid came out of them, and out of her mouth, as I heard an ear-shattering screech, inhuman and yet normal. I took the key home and cleaned it up. Still rusty, but the sludge is off. It's clean at least. I don't know what the key is to, what they were, why it gave me the key, or even what it wanted. Last night a hiker was found in the woods. The local news and the paper say he was dead a few days, and the police claim he ate some bad berries and fell, which caused his death. I called a friend who works at the morgue. He owes me a favor for a time when I covered for him, when he got caught with some weed. He agreed to meet me at a place. We went to said place, and had some food. I ordered some fries and a side of marinara sauce to dip them in. My girlfriend was a waitress here, thankfully, so I got a discount. He told me the truth. The guy was identified by his ID and his wallet. The only part the papers got right, might I add. He was staying at a local hotel in the area that's part of a massive countrywide franchise. He was a 35-year-old man. I can't give you his name for obvious reasons. His throat was torn out and the word key was dug into his chest. by what they assumed was a knife. A cold shiver went down my spine when he told me this. He asked what I knew and why I wanted to know. I told him that I'd seen a hiker in the woods earlier that week with my friends while camping at our usual spots. He knew the spot existed, but wasn't sure where it was. He told me I had to come forward if I knew anything. I told him I didn't, but only that we'd met him, and I was curious if it was the guy we'd met. Well, that's my story. I put the key away, locked in the trunk and buried it. Until I find out what it's for, I feel it's best to not keep it nearby, or on my person, especially not in my apartment. The police are looking for the man's killer. I haven't seen or heard anything from that, whatever they were. Am I scared it will come for the key? Yeah. Do I consider taking the key back and leaving it where I got it? Every time I think about it. Do I have a shiver up my spine as I write this? Absolutely. Is it making me paranoid that any sound could be the key stealer? You bet it does. But I'm not going down without a fight.